Hi y'all, I'm back. This is my take 3 on this video already, and I'm kind of over it, so hopefully this is the last one. But in case this is the first video you've seen and you have not yet seen my introduction, I am a licensed barber by the name of Z. A little disclaimer, I am not a licensed barber instructor. Any information that I give in this video is solely information that I retained from different sources, and it may or may not be accurate. I did my best to cross-check from different sources and match up the information to make sure that it was accurate, but I found myself going down a rabbit hole and getting more and more confused the further I looked into it, because yeah, it reminded me of when you have 3 different teachers trying to teach you the same subject, and they all teach it to you different, and they all have, a lot of information matches up to the last teacher, but then there's bits and pieces of information that contradicted what the last teacher taught you, or taught you something that the last teacher didn't. So not everybody has the same experiences in life, and not everybody interprets the information they receive the same way. So I'm going to do the best that I can, but ultimately it's up to you to review the information that I give you within your own educational resources, whether that's the Milady Standard Barber book or whatever other resources you have, to fact check the information I give you and make sure that it's accurate. But like I said, I'm hoping that it is, and I'm hoping that this is a helping hand and that I don't confuse y'all further. So with that said, today, my last video got cut off when I was trying to explain a few different techniques that I use to study. I feel like the main one that I seem to use the most is word association. And word association, I feel like I've used in multiple different ways. Some of those ways are associating a certain word to a past experience that I've had to help me remember it better, associating a specific word to other stuff that I learned that seem to be similar to this new stuff, and it'll help me remember easier. I create tables so that I can see it, visualize it, and hopefully retain it better. And then I create a list of words to associate with the subject that I'm learning or trying to remember, to help me be able to do process of elimination when having a test with multiple choice answers. So I feel like, let's say you're in class and you're following along with the teacher, you're understanding what they're saying, it's making sense, and you're like, hell yeah, but then somebody asks you something about what you learned and you're not able to spit the words out. You don't know how to take the information from here and put it here. Or when somebody wants you to write your answers instead of multiple choice, you just can't get it out. But if they give you a question and they give you multiple answers, you're still able to identify what the right answer is. You're able to see it and remember it, but you're not able to just take it out of your head yourself. So with that said, a lot of this stuff might not make sense right away and might sound confusing, but I do feel like if you take some time out of your day, whether it's multiple times a day or today, tomorrow, the day after, and maybe re-listen to it a couple times, it might not feel like you understand it completely because you can't verbally explain what you learned to someone else off the top of your head, but I do feel like it'll help you identify the correct answer when taking the test, or be able to use process of elimination easier. So yeah, let me dive into this. Like I said, I went down a rabbit hole, and this stuff took all day, weeks actually. I've been working on this for a while. Every time I spend a lot of time working on this, it's like the next day flew away, and I had to refresh my mind and research all over again, and yeah, it's just a hot mess. So I'm trying to finish this today so that I don't have to research the same information a dozen times and I can move on to the next thing, because at the end of this video, this is literally going to be like 1% of the whole book. So yeah, I need to hurry up. Also, I said that I was going to try to make my videos 10 minutes long, and I'm already at 5 minutes, almost 6, so I don't think that's going to happen. I don't know how long this video is going to be. I'm sorry. I hope you're able to follow along, and here we go. So we are reviewing electrotherapy when related to barbering. I think there's a lot of different forms of electrotherapy out there that are used like for estheticians and stuff, but when related to barbering, there was only a few that were mentioned. Also, I had mentioned in my first video that I was going to go over like glossary terms and their definitions. That way you're able to better understand and review the chapters yourself, since I'm not able to read out of the book. But I'm going to give a little bit more information than just definitions. I took my own notes, so I'm able to read my own notes. I got information from different sources, so this is mine. And there is going to be definitions to terms within all this information. It's just not going to look like I'm reading it off a list. So yeah, electrotherapy is different electric currents used for facial and scalp treatments. These currents are called modalities. Some examples of modalities, aka electric currents related to barbering, are galvanic current, microcurrent, and Tesla current. When using any of the modalities mentioned, different tools are used called electrodes. Sometimes different words are used interchangeably depending on who you're talking to. So that can make it hard for people to do good on a test when completely different terms are being used than the terms that were used when you studied out of the book or when you were being taught by a teacher at your school. So if I know a couple words that are used interchangeably, I'm going to mention them. That way hopefully it can be easier for you to understand or identify if you see it. So when using any of the modalities mentioned, different tools are used called electrodes, probes, applicators, or pull. There might be other terms, but those are the only ones that I'm familiar with. So these tools are tools that they use on the face when using the galvanic current machine. And those tools are called electrodes. Sometimes they're called probes, sometimes they're called applicators, and sometimes they're called a pull. So these electrodes direct current, aka electrical energy, from the machine to the client's skin. These electrodes, aka probes or applicators, are made of carbon, glass, or metal. Anything that I looked at was mainly metal. I don't know how common glass or carbon is used for the galvanic current machine, but that might be important information to remember. So these electrodes, aka probes or applicators, are made of carbon, glass, or metal. Electrodes can be negatively charged or positively charged. This is called polarity. Those electrodes that they use on your face when using the galvanic current machine can be either positive or negative, depending on how they're identified by the manufacturer instructions, or sometimes when they're not identified by the manufacturer instructions specifically as negative or positive, they can be used interchangeably. They can be used as negative or positive. It just depends on what it's attached to on the machine. So if you connect it to the negative slot, then that probe is the negative probe. If you connect it to the positive slot, then that probe is the positive probe. Like I said, sometimes the probe or the pull is specifically a negative and it has to be matched, the negative pull to the negative slot, and specifically a positive and it has to be matched, the positive to the positive slot. But sometimes it can be interchanged from a negative to a positive, but you have to read the manufacturer's instructions and make sure that you're using it properly. So anyway, electrodes can be negatively charged or positively charged. This is called polarity. If it is identified as either positive or negative, the positive one will be either red, have a P for positive, or have a plus sign. The positive one is called the anode, and the negative one will either be black, have an N for negative, or a minus sign, and it is called a cathode. Always follow manufacturer's instructions, but in most cases you would match negative with negative, positive with positive, slot in the machine. One way that I remember that the positive is red and the negative is black is I use word association, and I associate it with the cables when you're going to jumpstart a vehicle. The red cable is usually the positive and the black cable is the negative. Although like completely different situations and not related to each other, that's just helps me get a visual and remember what's negative and what's positive. But that might not work for you. That might confuse you more. Who knows? Whatever comes to mind to you, whatever might help you remember, then you use that. But we are going to review galvanic current. So modality number 1, when related to electrotherapy and barbering, is galvanic current. Galvanic current, and some facts that came to mind or that I reviewed were: galvanic current is low level electric current or low voltage. It is a direct current, and it uses positive and negative poles or electrodes. Again, the positive pole is called the anode and the negative pole is called the cathode. It creates chemical and ionic reactions in the skin. Reactions depend on polarity of active pole, aka whether it is positive or negative pole. So what I mean by active pole is the pole that they're using on the face is considered the active pole. I haven't gone this far into the information yet, but there's another pole that the client holds onto or that it is behind their shoulder. Reactions depend on polarity of the active pole. So what does that mean? Reactions depend on if the pole you're using on the face, the active pole, is negative or positive. Remember, polarity means negative or positive. So the reaction will be different depending on if the pole is negative or if it's positive. Reactions are positive to each other when using a positive pole compared to a negative pole. So if you're using a positive pole on the face, it's going to cause completely opposite reactions than if you were to use a negative pole on the face. Did I say positive? I don't know what I said. But point is it's going to be opposite reaction whether you use the positive one or you use the negative one. Galvanic electrodes can vary in shapes and sizes, but most common ones are the ball, the roller, and the opposing pole. Okay, hold on, rewind. If you want to see the opposite reactions that are caused whether you use a positive or a negative pole, read the table on page 212 in your Milady Standard Barbering book. That will show you a list of different reactions. Like I said in the beginning of the video, I don't even know if it was this one or the last one or the one before that, but look at tables, diagrams, pictures whenever you can in the book. It'll help you retain information and visualize information. But so galvanic electrodes can vary in shapes and sizes, but most common ones are the ball, the roller, and the opposing pole. I'm going to show you guys off my phone what those look like. Obviously, I'm not an expert at this video stuff, but bear with me. I'm trying to help and I'll get better. Just look up on Google galvanic electrodes and you'll be able to see the ball electrode is the one that looks like a little ball. The roller is one that is like this and it rolls on your face. It looks like a roller. And the opposing pole is just a straight pull, and that's the one that the client holds on to or that goes behind the shoulder. That opposing pull is being held by the client, which is considered the inactive pull. So I mentioned earlier the active pull is the one that is used on the face. The inactive one is considered the opposite polarity to the active pull being used on the face. So that's why it's called the opposing pull, opposite pull. So if the one on the face being used is positive, the one in the hand being held is negative. If the one being used on the face is negative, then the one in the hand is the opposite. So another random fact is the client may feel tingling once the active pull is in use, and they might taste metal in their mouth. One thing to remember that is very important is the machine needs to be turned off before placing the electrode on the face. So it needs to be off, you put it on the face, and then you turn it on. And then it needs to be turned off before removing from the face. So it needs to be off to avoid shocking the client. Okay, galvanic current is used for disincrustation and iontophoresis. Disincrustation is done to unclog pores for deep cleansing purposes. It causes a chemical reaction that emulsifies the sebum and waste in the pores, and it liquefies solid or semi-solid waste on the skin so that they are easier to remove. And then what is emulsify? Because when I read it causes a chemical reaction that emulsifies the sebum and waste in the pores, you might not understand what that means. So emulsify means to break down a substance into smaller droplets so it can be more easily mixed or absorbed. What I associated that with to kind of get a visual in my mind, which may or may not be correct, but this is how I interpreted it, is if you have a blackhead and sometimes like it might be hard and hard to like extract, hard to pop out, to emulsify it would break it down into small substances so that it can be easier to extract. So instead of being like one large hard blackhead, it would turn into a bunch of little small blackheads, I guess, to extract it. I don't know how to explain it better, but that's how I was able to visualize it. When using electrodes, aka probes or pulls, in galvanic current, they are wrapped in a wet cotton. An active electrode is applied to the face for 3 to 5 minutes after an acid-based solution is applied to the skin. Inactive electrode is held by the client in the right hand or behind the right shoulder. The ball electrode is the more common electrode used for disincrustation, but others can be used as well. So the little ball electrode that I try to show y'all and couldn't, that you can see in Google, is used to do disincrustation. Iontophoresis. Iontophoresis uses galvanic current to penetrate ionized water-soluble solutions into the skin. Ionized equals, in my interpretation, it means it contains ions. Now, what does ions mean? Ions are atoms or molecules that have lost or gained one or more electrons. Atoms are basic building blocks of matter, the smallest units of an element. They are composed of subatomic particles. Subatomic particles are particles smaller than atoms that make up atoms. They are protons, neutrons, and electrons. Molecules, a group of 2 or more atoms that chemically bond together. It can be the same element or different, such as H2O. It would be 2 hydrogen, 1 oxygen to create H2O. So since atoms contain protons, neutrons, and electrons, and molecules contain atoms, they also contain all 3 subatomic particles, aka protons, neutrons, and electrons. This is how we come to understand that an ion is an atom or a molecule that has lost or gained one or more electrons. So iontophoresis uses products that contain ions, which are called ionized solutions, and these ionized solutions can contain positive or negative charges called cations and anions. Sometimes they just call them negative ions or positive ions. If you are using the negative pull or the negative current on the skin, you need to use a solution containing more anions, aka negative ions, and vice versa. Positive polarity, aka positive current, equals positive ionized solution, aka solution that contains more cations. So use the negative current with the solution that has more negative ions, and then use the positive current with the solution that has more positive ions. So now that we know all that, moving on, iontophoresis happens in two forms, cataphoresis and anaphoresis. Cataphoresis uses the positive pole, aka the anode, and infuses or introduces acid pH product, aka positive product. It closes pores, it soothes nerves, decreases blood supply, hardens and firms tissues. Anaphoresis uses negative pole, aka the cathode, and infuses alkaline pH product into the skin, aka negative product. It opens pores, irritates, stimulates nerves, increases blood supply, softens tissues. Okay, so that is all the information that I took on galvanic current. But after I collected all that information, then I did my own little summary of all that information and different ways that I can remember that information by word association. So one way that I use word association is I wrote a list of words that I associated with the subject. I drew a table of information that I could remember easier with that table. And then I created a little story. So don't laugh at me, don't make fun of me, come up with your own story if you want to, but this is what I did. So galvanic current is my subject, what I'm trying to remember. And the information related to galvanic current that I narrowed down to single words or 2 words or whatever, are low level current or low voltage, chemical ionic reactions, metal carbon glass, cleanses, moisturizes, disincrustation, iontophoresis, cataphoresis, anaphoresis, ion containing water soluble solutions, aka ionized solutions. Then I narrowed that down if I really want to. So let's say you remember half of that information and you don't need to add that to your list of things that you want to associate with that word. You take those off, you remove them. Let's say you got disincrustation down, you know what that means. You don't need to add that to the list. Iontophoresis, you know what that means. You don't need to add that to the list. Let's say you forget that it's low level, or you get confused and you think it's high level or whatever, then write a list of the information that you have a hard time remembering, but like try to narrow it to single words and associate it to that subject. So if I had to circle a few words, let's just say I would circle low level, metal, ion, water soluble, ionized solution. So let's just say I remembered all that other information, but I have a hard time remembering those few things. Then I would circle those and focus on associating those to that subject and remembering that. So even though it's not giving me all this other information or a whole definition, when I get a question and it's talking about low level current, thanks to my list and reviewing that list and reviewing that list and reviewing that list, I know automatically that it's most likely talking about galvanic current. Or let's say that my question says something about a water soluble product or a metal probe or an ionized solution. I mean, you could use that term in different subjects possibly, but most likely associating those words to that subject and seeing the context of the question and the answers that I'm giving on the multiple choice, it'll help me narrow down and be able to find the answer ultimately. So yeah, that's what I feel helps me. So like, if you're studying a chapter that you have a hard time remembering and stuff, if you're not understanding what you're reading, at least pick out some words that you think are important when related to that subject. And one, review the glossary and try to understand those words. But two, if you don't, try to remember what those words are and associate them to the subject. So even if you don't remember what disincrustation is or iontophoresis is, associated with that subject. And like I mentioned before, I might not help you get that 100% on your test, but I might help you get that extra 5% or 10% that you need to get that passing score. So anyway, try to identify important words and associate them to the subject so that you can better identify what the correct answer is on the test. So another thing that I did was I created a table. On this table, I have a side that says positive and a side that says negative. Under my positive side, I listed anode, cataphoresis, acidic, cation, red, plus letter P. Really, I could cross off the plus and the P if I wanted to because that's just more common sense. But I would leave anode, cataphoresis, acidic, cation, and red. So this reminds me that anything under the positive list is a word that's related to something positive. So anode is related to the positive pull. Cataphoresis is related to, I forgot already. Cataphoresis uses the positive pull and infuses positive product. Everything about cataphoresis is positive pretty much. So I put cataphoresis under the positive list. Acidic is technically considered a positive thing. So if you're infusing an acidic solution, it's considered a positive product. So acidic under positive. Cation is a positively charged ion. So cation is a positive thing as well. Red identifies positive polarity. Plus identifies positive polarity. P identifies positive polarity. And under the negative list, I have the complete opposite of the things on the positive. So the negative identifies that the cathode is a negative thing, anaphoresis is a negative thing, alkaline is a negative thing, anion is a negative thing, black is the negative identifications on the polarity to help you identify that it's a negative pull. But cathode means negative pull. Anaphoresis uses the negative pull and infuses alkaline pH product, which is considered negative product. Stimulates the nerves, increases blood supplies, so they're considered negative things. So yeah, so my list contains the positive stuff and the negative stuff so that it's easier to remember what is what. So it can get really confusing to remember that because I feel like people just really like to mess with our heads. I don't understand it. But if it was me and I got to pick what word meant what, I would have considered anode positive, anaphoresis positive, anion positive. Because it's like all these words sound similar, but they're used as opposites in some cases, and so it gets confusing. So in negative, I would have used cathode, cataphoresis, and cation instead of cathode, anaphoresis, and anion. It's like it gets confusing. So another way that I used to remember those words, because I did get confused, like I would struggle, like, this don't make no sense. This sounds like this, but it means the opposite. So come up with a story. Don't laugh at my story. So I circled the first letters in anode and cataphoresis. I circled just an in anode and cat in cataphoresis. And my story went a little like this. Anne and Cat are two positive bubbly sisters with a cat named, don't laugh at my cat's name, acidic cation. So what does that do? That helps me remember that anode is positive, cataphoresis is positive, acidic is positive, and cation is positive. Because Anne and Cat are two positive, bubbly sisters with a cat named acidic cation. And then for negative, I circled cath in cathode and ana in anaphoresis. Again, it can get confusing because those are very similar to anode and cat. But instead, it's Kathy and Anna. Kathy and Anna are two negative evil stepsisters with a black cat named alkaline anion. That makes it easier for me to remember that all those words, cathode, anaphoresis, alkaline, anion, and black, are related to negative things because Kathy and Anna are the negative stepsisters, and they have a black cat named alkaline anion. And black cats are bad luck, so that's negative. So they say. It's probably not true. I'm sorry, black kitties. But anyway, that is the end of my galvanic current rant, and I hope that it somewhat helps instead of mind fucks y'all. Bye. Have a great day.